The Cat's Eye Chronicles, Book 1, Sora's Quest. A young adult, coming-of-age fantasy novel packed full of action and adventure, with a slow burn, enemies to lovers romance by T.L. Shreffler. Available now in ebook and print on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, Nook, Google Play and Apple Bookstores. The audiobook is also available by Tantor Media on audible.com and other audiobook retailers. Please enjoy this unabridged dramatized audiobook version for free, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. Synopsis. On the night of her blooming, 17-year-old Sora Fallcrest expects a gown, a suitor, and a life of luxury under her noble family's name. She does not expect the Viper, a masked assassin with jade-green eyes and a blade as quick as a whisper, to shatter her world. Abducted from the glittering ballroom and dragged into the wilds beyond the kingdom, Sora discovers that the necklace left to her by her mother, the Cat's Eye, is more than an heirloom. It's an ancient artifact of untold power, one that others would kill to possess. And Crash, her silent and dangerous captor, has plans for it, and for her. Sora discovers her own unexpected strength and courage as she embarks on a quest through dangerous lands to master the secrets of the Cat's Eye. And now, let our story begin.
Prologue. Blood stained his hands. Blood and flower pollen and the sickly smell of spilled perfume. Volcrian knelt in the doorway to the apothecary. A shattered jar containing a potion of honeysuckle, wartroot and thyme had spilled across the front steps. It spread slowly down the porch toward the street, just like the blood that oozed from his brother's body. Volcrian held his brother, stroking Etienne's cheek. Numb, he felt the life force drain out of him. He saw his brother's eyes go glassy and wide. Etienne died staring into the ephemera, seeing into the beyond. Etienne died in Volcrian's arms, years before his time. With shaking hands, Volcrian continued to stroke Etienne's cheek, his thoughts racing. He had known to come. He had known his brother was in danger. He had hoped to convince Etienne to close the apothecary and leave the city. There were dangers in using magic, risks that one should not take, especially in a world where magic was thought dead. Yet Etienne had taken a great risk, a foolish risk, and now this was his bitter reward. He was reminded of something his brother had once said when they first opened their practice.
"We are the only ones who can make these potions, Volcrian. Humans are weak. They have no magic. We will be safe here. It will be like the olden days before the war, when Wolvens were powerful. We will be rich and respected, as our lineage deserves."
But Wolvens were not powerful anymore. 2 days ago, a member of the nobility had bought a potion from them, a tonic to make a woman fall in love, but young Etienne had botched the tonic. He had forgotten a key ingredient, and it hadn't worked as planned. Volcrian had read of the woman's death in the paper just yesterday, the daughter of a well-respected noblewoman suddenly taken by a mysterious illness. The paper had insinuated that she was poisoned. With a gut-sinking dread, he had realized the truth. They had sold the potion to the same gentleman who was now grieving his lost love. And, knowing the nobility, there would be repercussions. There would be revenge. He had packed his bags last night and raced to the apothecary first thing in the morning, but not fast enough. Volcrian's nostrils flared as he touched his brother's face. Then his eyes travelled to the sticky red pool of blood on the ground. Something trembled within him, crawling from the tips of his fingers to the back of his throat. He could feel his brother's blood like a rush of heat, an itch, a knowledge carried in his bones. On the outside he was silent, calm, still, but inside magic surged through him, thick like black water. Who did this? Suddenly Volcrian didn't see the apothecary or the cobblestone street. His eyes clouded over, turning from ice blue to chilled silver. A vision came to him of his brother's final seconds. He saw the row of hedges across the street from their shop. He saw a clutch of early morning stars high overhead, and then a shadow, a knife, a face. He saw the last image that flashed before Etienne's eyes, his killer. Volcrian memorized what he saw, a man dressed in dark leathers, a cowl hiding the lower half of his face. A knife, long, wicked, curved to a vicious point. The man fleeing down the road. Then the vision slowly faded. He blinked, his eyes dry from staring, his nose filled with the fresh scent of his brother's blood. He glanced down at the body again. His brother had been struck down only minutes ago. It should take no longer to catch up with the killer. Volcrian leapt to his feet, Abandoning Etienne on the front steps, he took off running in the same direction the assassin had fled. Volcrian's body hummed with energy, with the ancient power of his race. This magic was his birthright, his heritage. His eyes were lined with silver, fueled by the power he had gained from his brother's blood. He could see the assassin's trail like a bright light against the ground. A beast inside of him roared for release. If the assassin escaped, it would be the worst disgrace, a complete dishonor, a final insult to his wolven kind. The pre-dawn city was silent. Volcrian passed scores of sleeping houses. Faster, faster. Suddenly the city gates rose before him. 2 guards stood to each side, their faces shadowed by iron helms. Volcrian slowed his steps. Beyond the gates, the countryside beckoned to him, yet the blood magic in his veins said the killer had not passed this way. His eyes flicked left, where a narrow alley cut between a row of shabby houses and the city wall. He saw a large stack of crates leaning up against the wall. This way. Volcrian ran into the alley and climbed up the pile of crates. Then he leapt over the wall without thinking. He landed hard, unprepared for such a long drop, and was forced to pause. It took him a moment to regain himself. He faced a dense thicket of trees and ivy. He couldn't see farther than a few meters in any direction. No human would have been able to hear, but he had wolven ears, keen and pointed. He noted a disturbance in the forest. Less than a rustle, simply a presence, but it was enough to prepare him for the attack. As silent as a ghost, a shadow peeled away from the trees and leapt toward him. A glint of silver inside the shadow indicated a knife, the same poisoned blade that had killed his brother. Volcrian was no warrior, but he had the advantage of magic and rage. With incredible swiftness, he pulled out his own knife and slashed the air wildly. The goddess took his side, and his blade sunk deep into flesh, striking the assassin just above his hip. With a growl and teeth bared, Volcrian dragged the knife up the man's body all the way to his neck, gutting him from navel to jaw. Most men would have collapsed within seconds, but not this assassin. Instead, impossibly, he grabbed Volcrian's hand and twisted it back. Volcrian heard his bones crunch. He saw his fingers twist into unnatural shapes. He screamed and collapsed on the ground. The assassin fled into the trees, swift and silent as a phantom. Volcrian remained in the cold dirt, stunned and breathless, his mangled hand cradled to his chest. He stared after the man who had killed his brother. He snarled into the woods. "No matter," he said, challenging the darkness. "Run like the pathetic coward you are. I shall find you." The assassin left a trail of blood behind. Its scent clogged Volcrian's nostrils, imprinting upon his mind. A bitter laugh escaped his lips. The killer thought he had escaped, but Volcrian had his blood. With that, he could trace the assassin anywhere. The assassin's fate was sealed. Volcrian tried to climb to his feet, but his hand caused him too much pain. Wearily, he sank back to the dirt. In that moment he hated his body, his weakness, his powerlessness to control his own limbs. Guilt clawed at him, mixed with a cold knowledge of failure. He wanted to slam his broken hand on the ground in frustration, or else cut off the limb completely. Anything to follow the assassin. But I have his blood, he soothed himself, which meant he had time. Time to find a healer to bind his hand. Time for Etienne's burial. He would have to bury his brother while his killer still lived, the ultimate dishonor to his wolven kind. I failed him. The thought crushed him like an avalanche, pressing him down into a pathetic, bestial position. He was alone now, friendless, a stranger in the world. Etienne had been his only family, his sole companion. How long had they struggled? How long had they fought to stay alive, to survive in human cities, to protect their lineage and magic? Something dark writhed in his gut, something wrathful and ravenous. He bared his teeth. The mage raised his head and howled to the trees, to the moon, to the cold pre-dawn light. I failed him. Etienne was dead, never to grow old, never to find peace. I failed him. All of their plans, gone, blown away. Nothing left, Volcrian murmured. He felt himself slipping from reality. Spinning, falling, nothing left. Etienne! Tears stung his eyes, hot and unbearable. No, nothing was left but revenge. His brother deserved as much. Blood demanded blood. Etienne, I will not fail you again.
Chapter 1. Sora looked in the mirror. She stared at the long, layered, elaborate dress. It was burnt pink, her least favorite color. Dozens of tiny crystals shimmered from her bodice and twinkled between the folds of her skirts. Today, she did not feel like shimmering or twinkling.
It's hideous,
she said, tugging at the skirt. Her handmaid, Lily, protested from her side.
No, not at all. It's decorative. You're beautiful.
It's the color of smoked salmon. Honestly, Lily, I think this whole ordeal is nonsense. I've never had a birthday party before. Why start now?
Lily opened her mouth, but no words came. Sora turned to look at her maid with one eyebrow raised. Her expression bordered on comical, since her eyebrows were painted in dramatic arches across her forehead. She hadn't been able to touch her face all day. The artisans had come that morning to paint her skin in ceremonial colors and patterns, all in preparation for the blooming. The paint had taken hours to apply.
We could leave.
What?
Forget the blooming. We could arrange a carriage and go.
Sora's eyes returned to the mirror, to the blanc made of bismuth and vinegar that exaggerated her paleness, to the bronze powder overlaying her cheeks and the tip of her nose.
I've never been to town before. It's my birthday, isn't it? Let's go exploring.
Lily, a frail young woman with bobbed black hair, seemed rigid at first, like a ruffled swan. Then her shoulders slowly melted, her face softened, her pale neck lost its tension.
I know this must be quite distressing to you, to have your father home after so many years.
Sora grimaced, briefly. The frown passed like the shadow of a bird across the ground. Lily turned her mistress toward the vanity, perhaps the least decorative piece in Sora's grand bedroom. A rug covered the floor from wall to wall, its woven strands thicker than grass and softer than wool. Her four-poster bed, enclosed by red drapes, dressed in thick furs and goose-down pillows, filled one corner of the room. All of Sora's furniture, ornately carved of dark cherrywood, had been passed down for generations. Tapestries framed the walls, portraying outdoor tea parties, serene mountains and lakes, and a peaceful white mare grazing in Elysian fields. Lily assisted Sora into her chair. She undid Sora's hair, a cascade of deep golden waves, and combed it out with a boar bristle brush.
It's not just a birthday party, you know. Your father has been preparing for this all year. He's invited all the second tier, and some of the royal court as well.
Second tier is fine. I don't mind the country nobility. It's the city nobles I don't like. Snooty and pretentious, the lot of them.
Oh hush, your father invited a few. Marrying into city nobility would be quite a dream come true.
Sora turned in her chair, staring up at her maid, who also happened to be her closest friend.
Truly? Have you forgotten all I've ever confided?
I still don't understand. Any young lady would jump at the chance to marry city nobility. You would never have to lift a finger again, not even to eat your own breakfast. What I would do with that kind of coin.
Lily's eyes glazed over, as they always did when she thought about money. Sora sighed and turned back to the mirror. She understood as much. As country nobility, or the second tier, she lived with comfortable wealth, just not considerable wealth. Noble blood didn't guarantee fistfuls of money, after all. Her family's nobility had been won through military service. The Fallcrests had spawned several generations of captains and generals. But now, the times of war and battle were long past. Peace had flourished in the kingdom of for hundreds of years. It had been a long, long time since a Fallcrest had done anything of note. Her father would be ecstatic if she landed as city noble. Rumour had it Sora was beautiful enough to slip into the first tier, highest in the kingdom. But she wasn't like other country nobility, who daydreamed of the royal city of crowns, of riverboats, masquerades, and of course, the yearly festival at winter solstice. An entire 4 weeks of mystifying feats, fine wines, and legendary debauchery. No, Sora's experience of city nobility was much the opposite, and it had left a bad taste in her mouth. The memories brought on a momentary pang of embarrassment, and she bit her lip, her brow furrowed in thought.
This birthday has nothing to do with me or my happiness.
Well, of course not.
Then you'll admit that this is all about my father, and marriage.
Lily nodded and glanced up, catching her mistress's eyes in the mirror. Then she recited in a sing-song voice.
You're 17, 'tis tradition. On a noble lady's 17th birthday, she must show the kingdom what she is worth. All families with eligible bachelors are invited. They dance with the lady and make their suits.
Make their suits.
Sora muttered, cutting off Lily's tirade.
It's like they're buying me. That's what the kitchen staff say.
Yes, well, that's the kitchen staff for you. Be thankful you're not one of them. Have you ever thought they might be jealous?
Lily gave a firm nod and began braiding Sora's hair in a series of small, neat rows. Her fingers moved deftly through the blonde locks.
But you're country nobility, and this is how it has always been. You have an estate to worry about. And marriage is not such a bad thing.
Her maid tapped Sora's shoulder knowingly.
Your Lord Father wants to ensure the future of his house.
Ugh! Enough!
Sora threw up her hands and jumped out of the chair, yanking her hair from Lily's grasp. It was so long and thick she hardly felt the pull. She mocked.
His house, his lineage, his marriage, his grandbabies, his future, all him. When was the last time my father even spoke to me, Lily?
There was an awkward pause. Her maid glanced away.
Am I ever going to get the chance to leave this place? I am 17 and I've never ridden off my father's lands.
It was an old song, one she had sung before. Her maid looked flustered. She fiddled with the ivory comb, running her hands along its length.
Your father doesn't want you befriending the wrong kind of people.
I don't care what he wants. A few common friends are better than complete solitude.
Solitude? Excuse me? Aren't you forgetting someone?
Lily smacked Sora playfully on the arm with the flat of the comb. Sora's mouth opened slightly in embarrassment.
I'm sorry, Lily. I didn't mean it like that.
It's all right, you just need to relax, you think too much. You'll dance with handsome suitors. The other ladies will all be jealous. Everyone will have a great time. You're just nervous.
I hate being the center of attention.
I know.
Lily went to place a hand on her mistress's shoulder, then paused, her palm hovering over the body paint.
Perhaps I'd best nip down to the kitchen for a calming tonic. It would take the edge off, let you enjoy yourself.
If you think it would help, I suppose.
Lily finally found a place for her sympathetic hand and awkwardly patted Sora's back.
I'll return in a minute.
Then, with a click of her black boots, she turned and walked quickly to the door, her deep blue skirt swaying with each stride. A second later, she was gone. Sora let out a long, slow breath. Her eyes turned to the distant window, watching the sun set in a blood-red glory, a sacrifice to the coming night. Far down in the courtyard, a dozen stable boys ran back and forth along the front drive, trying to keep up with the constant arrival of carriages and guests. She twisted her hands around her boar-bristle brush. Lily had a point. She was nervous about her dress, her body paint, and of course, the hundreds of eyes that would be staring at her.
All for what? A hand in marriage? When do I get to live my life?
For the past year, she had put off thinking about her blooming ceremony, her birthday, her suitors, everything. She had remained doggedly focused on everyday life, her schooling, flute lessons, and riding her horse through the vast acres of her father's estate. The months had dragged on until finally, the day had arrived. It seemed too soon.
I don't belong here,
she thought, gazing out the window down the front drive. Despite living her entire life on her father's estate, she barely knew the man, and now he wanted to get rid of her. She reflected on her father's stay in the City of Crowns, his cold, disinterested letters addressed to Lily about her studies. Sora was past the point of hating him. It didn't matter who attended the party, how she danced, or how much body paint she wore. Her father would never accept her. In his eyes, she was forever blemished, and nothing would remove that stain from his bloodline. Her mother, rumour had it, was common-born. Not that Sora had ever met her, not that she could prove or deny that claim. But amongst the nobility, rumour was as good as fact, and so the girls teased her, and the boys played pranks. She had been forced to endure a friendless childhood and, as an adolescent, enough awkward soirees to last a lifetime. Deep in thought, Sora crossed her grand bedroom to a bookshelf where a music box stood. She glanced at the door, listening for the maids. They couldn't know about her secret. Sora turned the music box upside down, and inside the box an object rattled. She slipped her fingers through a crack and dragged the necklace out from its hiding place, holding it up to the light. A single stone shaped like a glass marble hung from a long silver chain. It sparkled in the sunlight like an expensive gem. She had never been able to identify the stone, though she had looked through countless books. A green-tinted swirl shifted and swam inside of it, as though alive. It was her mother's necklace, also Lily had confirmed. Her mother, common-born and now disappeared. and Lord Fallcrest's greatest mistake. She didn't know if the rumours were true, if her mother truly was a peasant, or if that was just local gossip. Looking at the pretty green stone, she felt certain it was rare, not something that a mere peasant would own. The music box, the only relic left by her mother, had been forgotten in the nursery for years before Sora found it. When asked about it, Lily told her,
She never wore it, only held it. And sometimes, she would speak to it. But I was very young. I thought the stone was magic, but, well, that's just silly.
My mother left this to me. I know she did.
Sora thought. She had never worn it before, afraid she might lose it, but tonight she would become a woman grown. She wanted to feel some sort of connection to her mother, even if through a necklace. She fastened the clasp around her neck, careful not to smear the body paint. Chills flowed over her as the necklace settled in place. She jerked, resisting the urge to rub her arms, and looked over at the window. It was closed. Was there a draft? It was almost dark outside.
If only I were free to do as I wish.
Her mother could have been a harlot or a wandering gypsy who caught her father's eye, but she would never know unless she found her. Sora's hand trailed along her bookshelf, running over the old leather and gold leaf titles. Some were in languages she couldn't read, yet she kept the books anyway, for love of leather and ink. The top shelf was dedicated to the mythology of the War of the Races, stories of heroism and adventure. She wished she could be like the warriors of old, braving the wilderness, plunging into the unknown. She imagined hundreds of years ago, when legendary fighters had walked the lands, wielding deadly broadswords and enchanted arrows. Back in the time of the races, before city and country nobility, before mundacity, before magic had drained from the world. Sora's hand paused on a title, The Wanderer. Hadn't the first warrior of the goddess, Kalin the Wanderer, left her family behind? She had been a true adventurer, someone worth looking up to, strong enough to follow her own path. Sora stilled in shock. Was she truly considering it? Could she really run away?
I wouldn't have to get married. My father would never find me, and I'd be free to find my mother.
Brilliant. But it was also a very desperate plan.
I don't know the first thing about living outside the manor.
Couldn't she learn?
If not now, when?
Her breath quickened. Was she truly ready? Was she brave enough? Could she flee, escape like an uncaged bird, fly, even soar? It was already growing dark. The lanterns were lit across the front drive.
If I can gather a modest amount of supplies, I can stash the bag somewhere in the hallway. I could slip out after the dance when the guests are leaving.
She felt that icy sensation again, as though a cold draught of air had struck her feet, but she pushed her fear aside. She couldn't hesitate. She didn't have much time left before Lily returned. She crossed to the foot of her bed and opened an old chest. She pulled out a buckskin satchel, light tan in colour and smooth as butter to the touch. Digging deeper into the chest, she unearthed a delicate hunting knife with a handle carved of white bone. She also found a compass, a water skin, a heavy woolen cloak, and a wooden flute she had whittled by hand. Then she stood for a moment and racked her brain, trying to imagine what else she would need. Gold, of course. She kept a purse hidden under her mattress of coins and odd bits of jewellery, the perfect funds for an adventure. She dragged it out and dusted it off, and packed it away in her travel bag. Then she pulled tight the drawstrings with marked tension. Now what?
Milady, your paint is smeared.
Lily's horrified voice exclaimed behind her. Sora dropped her satchel behind the bed before her maid could see it.
Oh, I didn't hear you come in.
I shouldn't have left you alone.
Lily said from the doorway, her mouth pinched.
Did you touch your face? Your hair is stuck to your forehead. Here, I think I can fix it. Sit down and drink this, careful not to spill.
Her maid handed over a glass of dark, syrupy liquid. Sora took it gingerly. Lily went to find the jars of paint left by the artisans. Sora sat down in front of her vanity again, suppressing a groan. The skin artisans had forced her to stand stiffly for most of the afternoon as they painted her arms, neck and face. A beautiful blossom opening to the wind. They had murmured over and over again. She symbolized the fertility of the wind goddess. Lily retrieved a tiny paintbrush and started dabbing at the gold splotches and thin purple lines. As Sora stared at her face in the mirror, she felt another lurch of horror and anxiety, imagining the ceremony to come. Then her eyes focused on her mother's green necklace, which glinted secretively, and she felt herself smile. Who knew where Tamora would find her? Sora tried the tonic and winced. It tasted like rotten plums. Lily began braiding Sora's blonde hair with fresh white flowers and sprigs of rosemary. Chapter 2. Sora wished, really truly wished, that she had not drunk that tonic. 3 chimes of a bell initiated the ceremony. The lanterns in the ballroom were dimmed and the musicians assembled. The raised dais where Sora would dance was small for a stage and circular. Her audience sat on 3 sides with the musicians to her back. The most eligible bachelors would be seated the closest, to admire her grace and muscular calves from every angle. Her father hoped to have a proposal. From anyone, really. By the end of the night, she knew as much. Lily rushed Sora on stage once the lights were low. The bells chimed once. Sora found herself looking out across the audience at a distant chair where her father was sitting. She couldn't avert her gaze from his discouraging eyebrows and down-turned mouth. When he smiled, it was only ever in irony. Sora resisted the urge to touch her hair or fidget nervously. Any small mistake he would notice, and he would mock in later conversation. Thanks to the tonic, she was wobbling, off balance. The drink had been more than just pungent, it had been tipsy strong as well. The bells chimed again. Lily clasped Sora's hands one last time, gave her a slight squeeze for strength, then she scurried off stage through the musicians' pit. Sora readied herself, heart pounding, poised with her left foot supporting her weight, waiting for the music to begin. A hollow drum began to beat a slow, meditative rhythm. It echoed around the ballroom, thudding deeply against the walls. Then a low flute joined in, weaving its way up through the drumbeats like a sleepy serpent. The chimes struck. Sora stepped forward and back in measured intervals, swinging her hips slowly, rolling her body, twisting her arms into the air in snake-like patterns. It was a dance of the goddess, of the wind, of fertility and light, of expansive fields and deep forests. She followed the intricate melody across the small stage. Her dress, like the dance itself, was called the blooming and was sewn into different layers for the ceremony. Sora peeled off the first layer of skirts as the dance progressed. She bunched the strip of silk in her hands and tossed it to one of the onlookers, a particularly well-dressed man sitting close to the stage. She was surprised to see him catch it. He was dark-haired and broad-chested, and he stared at her with a magnetic gaze. The wind instruments escalated, and Sora followed the tempo. She spun and glided to the opposite side of the stage. She allowed the music to direct her steps, forward, back, side to side, then turn, arms in, up. The bells chimed again, and she pulled off another layer, tossing it into the darkness beyond the stage. Now the dress clasped her body like a glove. The music became a cyclone, picking up ferocity and passion. She rolled her head, shoulders back, look up. Her eyes landed on the skylight, the gorgeous expanse of clear glass that encased the ballroom, her father's crowning jewel. A net of stars sparkled back at her, winking, spinning. She had practiced this dance since her first blood at 13. She knew it would end soon. Now she felt bold. She spun with ease to the tempo, wondering why she had been so afraid of this moment. The musicians entered into their final refrain, and Sora made one last turn, whirling elegantly to a cascade of flutes. An applause was already building. Then, her heeled shoe caught on the hem of her dress. Sora wobbled once, twice. Carried by her own momentum, she felt everything spiral out of control. The crowd gasped as she tumbled across the stage, her ankle twisting underneath her, her shoes clonking loudly against the wood. She collapsed awkwardly to the floor, the dress entangling her legs, the body paint smeared down her left arm. She looked up in horror. Her gaze landed immediately on her father. His face hadn't changed since the performance began. Then, blessedly, the lanterns were doused, signaling the end of the performance. The stage was plunged into instant darkness. The ballroom was silent. Someone snorted nearby. A few scattered claps came from the back rows, Sora suspected from the manor staff, although she was too shaken to care. The applause built again, though not nearly as enthusiastic as before. She could detect bouts of laughter and muffled giggles. Her arms trembled. "I can't believe it. I fell." The worst humiliation. Not only did it make her seem clumsy and lame, it was significant bad luck. Loss of wealth, death, illness, all of it. Forget marrying into the upper tiers, she would be surprised to hear from the horsemaster's son. Sora stumbled off stage before the lanterns were relit. After that performance, her guests would expect her to disappear, and her father too. How could she face him after this? Just before she reached the exit, a figure blocked her path. She looked up. Who? The room was still very dark.
A beautiful, if flawed, performance,
A voice said. A deep, masculine voice. She curtsied automatically.
Thank you. Now, if you'll excuse me,
I was hoping to ask for your first dance.
Sora peered through the dim light of the room. She could hardly see the man's countenance before her, but she thought she might have recognized him from the front row. Sora was diverted from the conversation by a wineglass's dignified ping. More lanterns were lit. Her father stood at a long table where a feast had been laid for the guests. After he struck the wineglass again, the chatter dimmed and everyone turned toward him. She watched her father's grey head from a distance. A toast. No, worse, an apology. For her, of course. For being undesirable, clumsy and peasant-born. He opened his speech with some sort of joke and motioned in her direction. She was too far away to hear it, but a ripple of laughter moved through the room. Her gut lurched and she blushed. For a moment, a terrible, stifling moment, she wanted to give the whole room a piece of her mind. But of course she couldn't. The stranger at her elbow made a comment, but she was incapable of listening. A strange numbness washed over her. There was a dull buzzing in her ears from the drone of her father's voice. Sora's eyes drifted upward, focusing on the stars through the skylight. This was it. Now she would have to run away. Nobility be damned. There was no way she could show her face again before the second tier. Bad luck, she thought. Then she blinked. Was it her imagination, or had she seen something move beyond the distant glass of the skylight? A shooting star, a cloud, or some sign from the goddess? 1 second later, the world shattered. Her father's grumbling voice was suddenly cut off by an ear-splitting crash. The skylight exploded into a million pieces. Glass shards, some as sharp and heavy as swords, rained down on the ballroom. Sora's mouth opened. She could scarcely breathe. There was instant chaos. The guests screamed and dove in every direction, squeezing under tables and dodging the deadly glass rain. Servants dashed around, trying to escape. Men collided into each other. Women tripped over their hems, screaming at the top of their lungs. Ironically, the calming potion decided to kick in again, and Sora found herself distant and fuzzy as she looked up at the broken skylight. She felt dreamlike. Part of her wanted to laugh at the outrageous sight.
as though this night could get any worse.
And there stood her father at the head of it all, unmoved, a lord to the very end. He waved his arms around and roared out orders to the servants. To herself, she thought,
Doesn't the man ever give up? Gods, this is terrible. Just tell everyone to go home and come back next week. This ceremony is over.
Suddenly his words were cut off. Sora blinked in surprise. She couldn't quite see what had happened. The room was too crowded. Then people started screaming. Suddenly her father was on his knees, scrabbling at the ground, dark red blood staining his shirt. The room grew dim. Sora heard a dull, rushing noise. She stared at the place where her father had stood, her mind replaying the scene again and again within a matter of milliseconds. Was her father injured, struck down by the falling glass? No, impossible. How? Then some inner voice screamed at her.
What are you doing? This is your chance. Run.
Automatically, clumsily, Sora turned and fled. For the moment, her father was out of commission. It was the perfect time to slip away. She was certain he would be fine after all. He had more than 100 servants at his beck and call, who were far better equipped to handle an injury than she was. And so, boots crunching on glass, pandemonium ringing in her ears, she dove for the opening to the servants' hall. While the manor was vast with corridors branching out in several directions, she knew every nook and cranny. She sprinted into the hall and down the flagstone corridor. As she ran, she ripped off what she could of her skirts, freeing up her legs. She used a strip of cloth to wipe off the face paint. This dress was an ugly garment anyway. She headed down another narrow hallway that was barely lit by a few candles. It would lead her out the back door and into the freedom of the night. Already Sora could see her travel bag up ahead, stashed in one of the servant alcoves. She had hidden it before the dance, on her way to the blooming hall. Her breath heavy in her lungs, she redoubled her pace. She could hear the servants stirring, alarmed by the calamity in the ballroom. She found herself wondering,
Just what caused the skylight to break like that anyway? And what did I see before it fell?
it must have been someone on the rooftop. Was it possible her father had been attacked? Silly, of course not. Now was not the time to scare herself with vague questions. Her father would be fine, she had to focus on escaping. Sora passed the alcove where her bag was and grabbed it without breaking her stride. She had to leave quickly before someone discovered her absence. The red carpet seemed to lead on forever, though it was only a few rooms away from the back door.
Gods, I'll never make it outside. Come on, legs, move!
Without warning, a door burst open ahead of her, and a crowd of servants flooded the hall. Sora barely contained a yelp of surprise. Flinging herself into a broom closet, she slipped deep into the shadows and prayed that nobody had seen her. Breathless, nervous and quivering, she scanned the hallway with wide eyes. The entire kitchen staff rushed past, hurrying to reach the traumatized guests. Some carried lanterns, illuminating her hair and face momentarily, but no one noticed. No one looked. Sora let out a slow breath, then stripped off what remained of her dress and changed into her traveling clothes, doing her best to wipe off the rest of the face paint, even though she didn't have a mirror. When the hallways were silent again, she allowed herself a long, slow sigh of relief. She kicked the ruined dress into the far reaches of the closet, shouldered her bag, and walked carefully to the stone corridor, checking in both directions. Nothing. She launched herself onto the flagstone, gathered herself and turned. An unidentified something or other crashed into her, hard enough to send her sprawling to the floor. She hit hard and rolled several feet before slamming into the wall. A body was tangled on top of her. She felt the toe of a boot in her back. Without thinking, Sora did what any sensible woman would do. She screamed. Immediately, whoever it was jumped off her. A hand grabbed her braid and yanked her to her feet. Sora screeched, but her cry was cut off by a smart slap to the face that stunned her to silence. She looked at the man holding her, by her standards quite tall, around 6 feet. She was stunned by green eyes so vibrant that for a moment she thought they glowed. Then she blinked and brought the rest of the man's features into focus. Black hair darker than a raven's wing swept across his brow in a short cut, exposing 2 neat ears. His skin was lightly tanned, but she could make out very little of his face. Most of his lower features were hidden behind a black veil. Once again her eyes were riveted to his gaze, sharper than a knife, his expression terrifying. Suddenly she felt her throat close. Dear goddess. Was this the man who had destroyed the skylight?
With eyes like that, I wouldn't put it past him.
Before her imagination could run away with her, he whipped out a knife and pressed it against her throat.
Make a noise, and it'll be your last.
He hissed. His voice was quiet and smooth, like a snake. With a shudder, Sora thought it must be the voice of death. She licked her dry lips, shaking with terror, her fingers curling up like dried leaves. Somehow she found the will to speak.
Who are you?
No questions.
The knife bit deeper. She shuddered, and her words slipped out like water.
Please, don't kill me. I won't tell anyone.
Tongues talk. I should take yours.
No. If you don't trust me, then take me with you.
Saying that shocked her. Her lips stayed parted, as though expecting more words, her breath wheezing out in a hollow gasp. He gazed at her with those calculating serpentine eyes, travelling over her hair, her face across her shoulders. Then his eyes lingered at her throat, close to where the knife pressed against her skin. Slowly he frowned, staring at the base of her neck. No reply. At that moment a commotion broke out down the hall. There was a distant flicker of light. His eyes looked up and focused behind her. He grabbed her hand, turned and ran. Sora was so stunned she couldn't make her legs move. She found herself half dragged, half carried down the hallway. Then, with a surge of willpower, she forced her legs to work and launched into a sprint. Despite her fit condition, it was almost impossible to keep up with him.
Dear goddess, have I gone mad?
Was she actually running next to this man? She had no answer to that. His hand on her wrist was like solid steel, but the rest of him was a shadow, a ghost flickering in and out of the lantern light, existing between 2 worlds. He could have been a dream, a nightmare, some corporeal spirit. She almost half believed it. Who was he? They burst through a side door, one of the servants' entrances, and plunged into the freezing night. Sora felt that she'd been doused with ice water, suddenly awake. The stables were in the opposite direction and she still had her satchel. She could run for her horse, if this person would only let go of her hand.
Enough.
She grunted. She had joined him willingly, but she didn't intend to travel with him, not at all. When she tried to pull her hand away, his grip tightened. Her fighting instincts kicked in. With a jerk, she yanked hard, trying to free her arm. His fingers clamped down like iron, shocking her with their strength. She winced. That's going to bruise.
Hey! Let go! Where are you taking me?
She demanded, still pulling away from him, though it wasn't very effective. He moved her along at a rapid pace, half lifting her from the ground, hardly sparing her a glance. She dug her feet into the gravel driveway, skidding across the loose shale. His fingers gripped a little tighter, but other than that, he ignored her. There was no one around, no servants, no lawn workers, no maids. Everyone had gone to the ballroom. She was caught, helpless. Then she had a terrible thought. Would anyone notice her disappearance? With all of the distraction inside the manor, she highly doubted it. The guests and servants would think she was hiding in her room, shamed by her deplorable performance. But the blooming hardly seemed like much of an ordeal now. The man in black continued to drag her up the driveway and then into a thick outcropping of bushes.
I'm such a fool. He's going to take me to the middle of nowhere and kill me,
she thought, something like an icy fist seizing her chest. She should have died in the manor by letting him slit her throat. At least then her corpse wouldn't be ravaged by animals. She dug her heels into the ground again, tossing herself to one side, almost yanking her arm out of its socket. But there was no way she could fight his strength. He adjusted easily. With a light tug, she was sent stumbling forward, completely off balance. Then, through the murky, leafy darkness, she saw a horse, an ugly, awkward animal by what she could make out, dull grey in colour, like the gravel beneath them, and built only for speed. Before she could protest, a powerful arm snaked around her and forcefully threw her into the saddle. A yelp of shock and outrage came from her throat, but quickly stopped when he jumped up behind her, the knife still glinting in his hand. Now Sora really began to panic. All her nerve disappeared.
Help! Help me! I'm being kidnapped! Help!
With wild abandon, she tried to throw herself from the horse, but the dark man grabbed her as she started to fall. He jerked her back against him and the knife was at her throat a second time. She winced. Her shoulder ached and throbbed from the struggle.
Silence. You can die now, if you'd like.
He pressed the knife hard against her throat, enough to draw blood. Sora could feel the sting of the blade. A thin, hot trickle of blood crept down her neck. She would have gulped, but she was afraid of splitting her throat. The man pressed against the horse, which had been pawing the earth impatiently, and the beast leapt into a gallop. Sora couldn't see how fast they were going since she was surrounded by darkness. From the wind in her face and the feel of the steed beneath her, she figured it was a formidable pace. Her suspicions were confirmed when they passed the gates of the estate in under 10 minutes. The night was bitingly cold, sinking through Sora's clothes and into her skin. There was a cloak in her satchel, but no way to pull it out. Her captor was like a furnace behind her. She could feel his heat through the back of her thin shirt. The man turned off the front drive into a wide, open field, scattered with ferns and small bushes. The ground changed, now soft and muffled beneath the horse's hooves. Sora squeaked in surprise as the horse stumbled over a hidden rock, but the man righted the beast immediately. She clutched her satchel desperately and sent a silent prayer to the goddess.
How did this happen? I was supposed to be running away.
And who was this intruder? A common thief. More than that, someone deadly. She thought back to Lord Fallcrest, lying wounded in the ballroom. Had the disaster been more than an accident? Had her Lord Father been hurt intentionally? Was he even alive? The thought sent her spiralling into panic. She had the sudden, horrible feeling that the blooming ceremony had been sabotaged on purpose. Lord Fallcrest had been gone for quite a while at the City of Crowns. Who knew what enemies he had made, and in what kind of business he had been dabbling? The knife blade was lowered, though it stayed in her peripheral vision. She swallowed hard, tamping down her fear. No, she was overreacting. Her father was still alive, only slightly injured, like several of the other guests.
This man is a thief, a lowly criminal. He just wants me for ransom.
Her thoughts were strange, surreal. Then a fragile calm settled over her, like fine mist. She had to think logically. Whether Lord Fallcrest was alive or dead, nothing changed. If she ran back home, she would still have to take suits, marry, start a family.
Be realistic. You can't run an estate by yourself?
If anything, that thought terrified her even more than the man behind her. There was no avoiding that life, not after tonight. No, she wasn't going home. She couldn't. Not after making it this far. Which meant she would have to escape her captor. She gripped the satchel before her, fingers cramped with anxiety. The ever-constant motion of the horse was almost soothing. The man behind her was momentarily silent.
Well, I need a plan. Simple is best,
she figured. Sooner or later they would have to stop. When her captor dismounted, she could knee him in the groin and run into the woods. It was the most logical thing to do. Then she would continue on her way to town. She didn't know the road, but she could ask anyone for directions. And she still had her satchel, her lifeline. She had enough money to buy a horse and be gone before anyone thought to look for her. She would leave this killer and her ill-fated manor in the dust. Then she would begin the hunt for her mother. Local house servants, newsboys, the county recorders might know something. A lord's business was everyone's business after all. It was admittedly a flawed plan, but the best she could do for the moment. She reached up and touched the necklace that dangled beneath her shirt. The stone felt warm, even through the thick linen. A line of trees appeared in the distance, a forest. Sora felt a sliver of doubt. She had explored much of her father's lands, but had never gone this far out. They had been galloping for almost an hour. This proved that she was thoroughly lost. The horse whuffed and panted, a sheen of sweat on its thick grey neck. They reached the tree line and entered the forest. It was dark and overgrown, menacing, far different from the acreage around her manor. The branches overhead blocked out the stars, obscuring all hint of light. Sora leaned forward in the saddle cautiously, hit by another wave of sickly terror. Without warning, the man grabbed her head and forced it down below a branch, drawing a muffled shriek from her lips. She thought for sure she would be beheaded. When she sat back up, she was not only breathing hard, but trembling and flinching at every small shift the horse made.
Did he put the knife away?
She wondered, still regrouping. Sora looked ahead, peering between the darkened trees, as though they held an unseen solution. She was determined to be prepared for whatever came next. She squinted. It seemed that there was a slight flicker of light ahead, the telltale signs of a campfire. A nervous grin came to her lips.
What kind of idiot leaves a fire burning untended in the middle of a forest?
Maybe this would be easier than she had first thought. They reached the fire quickly. Her captor halted the horse just outside the circle of light. Then the man dismounted smoothly, then grabbed her with firm hands and lifted her down next to him. Sora found herself standing on a soft cushion of pine needles. She looked up at her captor, trying to see him clearly in the darkness, though he was almost invisible. Finally, she made out his shadowy, intimidating face. Gathering her wits,
Here it is! My chance!
She launched herself at him, trying to attack him as she had planned. She fumbled, attempting to knee his unprotected groin. He caught her easily and held her hands up by the wrists, barely concerned by her sudden action. Her lips parted, the air taken out of her, shocked by a sudden sense of failure.
That went well,
she thought sarcastically. All hope left her and Sora sagged in his grip. Her strength seemed to have drained out through the soles of her feet. She was lost. Then she noticed the rope he was carrying. She watched numbly as he tied her hands in front of her. When he was finished tying her, he shoved her into the firelight without ceremony. She looked around the camp, truly unsure of herself. The clearing was small and neat, a mere pocket of light and warmth amidst the trees. A rabbit was roasting over a modest fire, the delicious smell of cooking meat rich in the air. A heap of saddlebags rested to one side of the fire. She let out a breath. A dangerous-looking sword leaned against a tree, glinting in the firelight, and several other weapons were laid out alongside it. Next to that were 2 bedrolls. Sora's breath caught. 2 bedrolls? Then her eyes saw a figure sitting on the opposite side of the fire, half obscured by shadow. In this light, she wasn't sure if it was a man or a woman. The fire danced, casting peculiar shadows. The person's nose was small and pointed, the lips not overly generous. There was a thin jaw with wide, exaggerated cheeks. Feminine. Yet a thicker neck, muscular shoulders and a flat chest. To her mind, the stranger was completely androgynous. He or she looked youthful, only 6 or 7 years older than herself, and yet the hair was at odds with the age. The locks were pure silver, pulled back in a thick braid that trailed to the ground. Sora had never seen such a brazen colour, like concentrated starlight, not even on her most elderly servants. The figure shifted, scratching its back against a tree, then said wryly,
Bringing home stray pets, Crash? You know we can't keep it.
Quiet, Dorian. I ran into her in the halls. Couldn't just let her go, could I?
The silver-haired Dorian snorted in response. Sora guessed it was a man by the name and his wide shoulders, but the voice was evenly pitched and could have gone either way. There was a slight accent to the words. It reminded her of the north, thick and rounded.
Couldn't you have killed her?
Her dark captor remained silent.
I see. So then, I trust that the job went well?
It did. Unexpectedly.
Sora thought it was a strange name, Crash. Perhaps not his true name at all. The dark stranger left the fire to unsaddle his horse. Sora stood awkwardly, wondering if she should sit. Then Dorian asked,
So what are we going to do with her? This doesn't make our position any better. You know, we should just cut her loose, let her go.
We can't risk that. Volcrian will find her and she might be of some use.
Right, some use. But I don't share my women.
A lopsided grin split Dorian's face. Crash cast a cold, pointed look at the silver-haired man. Sora shuddered, catching the gist of their conversation. She knew she was in a vulnerable position. They could do whatever they wanted to her, and she wouldn't be able to stop them. Then Crash spoke again.
She's wearing a necklace.
What's that? Is it worth much? Let's see it, sweetness. Where is this necklace?
Dorian cocked his head to one side, a curious glint in his eyes. His gaze fell to Sora's neck. She was loath to pull the chain out into the open. What if they stole it? It was the only thing remaining of her mother. But one look at Crash changed her mind. Better her necklace than her throat. She pulled the piece of jewellery out of her shirt, dangling it in the open. Dorian squinted for a moment, then his eyes widened, his brows shot up to his hairline.
Is that?
Yes, I am certain of it.
Ah.
And the two fell silent. Sora dropped the piece of jewellery back into her shirt. She raised a hand to her neck self-consciously. She wanted to ask what they were talking about, demand that they explain themselves, but she was too terrified. They could still kill her. Why keep her alive, just for a necklace?
Just count your lucky stars,
she told herself, biting her lip.
At least they haven't disposed of you yet.
So, is that the plan? We just bring her along?
Crash was staring at her. His face was hard and cold behind the black veil. All she could see were those cool green eyes like flecked algae, oddly unblinking. And yet there was a sudden, inexplicable connection, an almost understanding. She was reminded of her words in the hallway, desperate, breathless.
Take me with you.
With an abrupt move, the dark man crossed the campsite and grabbed her satchel, easily yanking it from her grasp. Sora practically dropped the bag, she was so surprised. He ripped it open, spilling the contents to the ground, and she gasped, looking down in despair. A sudden flush of embarrassment crossed her cheeks. Of all things! There lay her humble loaf of travel bread and a small lump of dried meat, her shabby grey cloak, still fine next to her captor's grimy clothes. The coin purse and flute. She glanced up, quickly meeting Dorian's eyes, then looked away. Attention settled on the camp. Sora gazed at her belongings, trying to remember all she had packed. Her knife. Where had her knife gone? Her eyes darted around in the shadows, and she finally saw the glint of a blade, half obscured by a gnarled tree root. She looked away quickly, trying not to think about it, to alert her captors. But the two men were still staring at the spilled contents of the satchel.
Well, it seems that we have a runaway.
Sora's face paled, turning a stark white, humiliated to no end. Did he have to say it like that? Like she was a child sneaking off into the woods? Crash picked up the bag of coins and tossed it to Dorian. It made a heavy sound in his hand. Then the assassin wordlessly sifted through her belongings, tucking away what he could use, very little. When the satchel was passed back to her, all it contained were a change of clothes and her wooden flute. Dorian raised an eyebrow.
Quite a bit of coin. Seems unlikely that a servant would carry this much. I doubt you are a commoner, my dear, and you don't appear a thief. By the way, what is that all over your face?
It took Sora a moment to realize what he was talking about, and that he expected an answer.
My face?
She raised a shaky hand to her cheek, then pulled it away, only to see smudges of red paint across her fingers.
Oh. It's...
Sora bit her lip. Should she tell them the truth, who she really was, or would that endanger her even further? She was nobility after all, even if it was only second tier. She could be worth a hefty ransom. Her eyes slid to the man in black. He had been in the manor, had witnessed the blooming, or had at least known of it. Her identity was no secret. They were playing a game.
My name is Sora Fallcrest,
she said, resisting the urge to raise her chin. It felt strange to say her name without the lady attached, but she was leaving that life behind, for good. Dorian raised an eyebrow and looked at Crash.
Fallcrest, eh? Our new pet has a pedigree. That's not very low profile. You just had to steal a trophy, didn't you?
The dark man didn't reply. Dorian continued, looking back to Sora. He spoke mockingly.
Well then, it was your name day, was it not? Happy name day, my dear.
Her eyes widened. In all of the panic, she had almost forgotten.
Oh. Yes.
Did you perform the blooming?
Sora was surprised by his knowledge of her, and more than a little insulted by his tone. He spoke as though she were 5 years old. Her brow lowered. What else did they know about her? Had they watched her family for some time? She didn't know much about the ways of criminals. It was very unnerving. Her mouth was clamped shut. If they knew this much already, she wouldn't tell these bastards anything more. For all she knew, they had conspired to harm Lord Fallcrest, and she could well be next. Dorian grinned at her silence. He gave her a sly, terrible look.
Any chance of a rendition? I've never seen a blooming, but I hear it is quite provocative, about fertility, you know.
Gross. Sora glanced down, focusing on the fire. Her face turned even whiter with anger. The blooming was a sacred ceremony. Young girls were prepared as early as 11. They practiced for years, and here he was, scoffing at it like a common harlot's act. She wouldn't deign him with a reply. She remained stiff and silent. Eventually, it seemed that Dorian grew bored. He yawned.
Well, I see we're not going to get any entertainment out of you. Sit down, girl. You're making my neck ache.
Sora obeyed, seething on the inside. Her legs were shaking from a mixture of fear and outrage, but she was trying to hide it. She sat as close to the hidden knife as possible. The dirt was cold and damp beneath the trees, and the chill crept straight through the seat of her pants.
Good thing I thought to bring a cloak,
she thought to herself. She picked up the thick fabric from the ground, trying to drag it across her shoulders, though she was limited by her bound hands. Dorian seemed to notice her discomfort, and another sneer pulled at his lips.
I suppose you're used to soft feather beds and warm meals, eh? Well, don't expect anything like that around here. You'll be sleeping on dirt until we find a way to get rid of you.
She ignored him, though the words circled around in her head.
Get rid of me,
she thought. Would they kill her, dispose of the body, or worse, sell her? She glanced again to the man in black, who had finished with his horse and was now sitting at her far left. He held a long, thin sword across his lap, and his fingers moved over it expertly, turning and flipping the blade in his hands as he polished it with an old rag. He worked deftly, silently.
Ah, the meat's done,
Dorian said, and leaned forward to poke at the rabbit with a wicked knife. His face finally came into full view, brightly illuminated by the orange fire. Sora drew in a sharp gasp. 2 long ears protruded from his hair, elegantly sloped, pointed, ashen skin and brilliant blue eyes, the colour of an Arctic sky. Dorian caught her stare and cocked his head slightly to one side, twitched one long ear. His large, pale eyes met hers. Then he showed his teeth. No, not teeth. Fangs. The man had fangs. Dear goddess, fangs. He chuckled and speared the meat from the fire in a vicious movement.
What's the matter, sweetness? Never seen a wolfie before?
A wolfie?
Sora stuttered. She didn't recognize the term.
Perhaps you're more familiar with wolven.
Now she didn't know what to think. She would have laughed if he hadn't been holding a sharp knife.
Wolven! Impossible! They don't truly exist!
His look made her fall silent. She glanced at Crash, who was still polishing the sword, ignoring the conversation.
But the wolven race, they've been dead for centuries.
Obviously not, since you're looking at one.
Sora couldn't think of what to say.
Rich and ignorant, typical.
He grunted and went back to slicing meat. Sora couldn't help herself. If there was one thing she had earned in life, it was an education.
I'm not ignorant. I've heard about your kind, but only as legends. Not even in history books.
She tried to explain. There were countless mentions of wolvens in the tales of Caelin the Wanderer, wolfies as Dorian so casually called them, but those were stories from ages past, before magic had been lost, before the Great War of the Races. And could she truly believe this man? He was an outlaw, a common thief. He might be playing another game. But his ears, his unusual hair, his fangs. Dorian turned away from her toward the menace in black.
Seems like she'll be very useful,
he said. and offered Crash the first slice of meat. Sora heard the sarcasm. Crash ignored the comment, as he seemed to ignore everything. His silence was not comforting. It caused a sense of foreboding, like a dark cloud hanging over their camp. Sora wished he would speak. She couldn't guess his thoughts. The lack of insight made her breath quiver.
I'm of no value to them.
She thought privately to herself. Would they kill her after all?
It's only a matter of time.
Crash lowered his cowl to eat. She stared in rapt attention, trying to glean some sense of the man, and again she was surprised. She thought he would be scarred and gruesome, to match his cold personality, but his features were almost pleasant to look upon. His face was clean, without a hint of stubble. A straight nose rested evenly above hard, unforgiving lips, a tight jaw, stern brows and deep-set eyes. She would have described him as a rogue fox or a wolf, ruffled from the wilderness yet strong and sleek. He appeared to be around 25 summers, around the same age as Dorian. His skin was tanned by the road, creased by the sun. His form was lean and wiry, fit but not bulky, clothed in black leather and a well-used belt. She caught sight of a wide silver scar travelling down his jaw into his shirt. It looked like it had once been a ghastly wound. She shuddered. He stared boldly back at her. She looked away quickly, only to give another jump of surprise. Hovering before her face was another slice of meat, proffered by the self-proclaimed Wolfie.
Come now, sweetness,
Dorian said, with a slight bite to it.
Plain meat not good enough for you?
Sora glared at him, thinking all sorts of horrible things. She forcefully grabbed the piece of meat, though it was hard to hold with her tied wrists. She bit into it and chewed through, trying not to grimace at the burnt flavour, the stringy, tough sinews that caught between her teeth. It was, in a word, disgusting. The man snorted and sat back, then took a healthy portion of the rabbit for himself.
You're welcome,
he said, mocking her once again. Sora refused to rise to the bait. She concentrated on eating and kept to a stubborn silence. She didn't want their attention, so she wouldn't ask for it. Eventually, her two captors finished their meals. They shared a glance, then stood up, moving away from the fire. They paused somewhere just beyond her line of sight, hidden by a thin curtain of foliage, conversing in quiet tones. She obviously wasn't supposed to overhear their conversation. Sora glanced around, wondering if they had a clear view of her. She was absolutely certain that they were discussing her death. In that moment, she was ready for anything, especially the worst.
I won't sit here like a docile sheep,
she thought to herself. She scooted to the side and curled up, as close to the thick tree roots as she could get. She sent a silent prayer to the goddess. She waited for some sign that they were watching, but there was none. Carefully, she stretched out. The knife was only a few inches from her hand. Her fingers wrapped around the hilt. She snatched the blade up into her palm, slipped it between her hands, and started cutting one of the bonds. The rope was thick and tough, unexpectedly resistant. Her breath came in short, quick gasps, tight with the effort. She glanced up again, squinting against the glare of the fire, trying to glimpse the two figures between the leaves. There was a blur before her eyes. A shadow flitted above her, a sudden rustle in the brush. Then the knife was taken effortlessly from her fingers. Sora gasped. It was as though she had been holding a feather. She sat up, shocked, to find Crash glaring down at her. The look made her heart stop.
I don't make idle threats, girl. I spared you once, but we don't need you alive.
Thud. The knife struck the ground, less than a half-inch from her foot. Sora flinched. Her eyes widened. She looked from hilt to hand, to the hilt, then back to his hand. She hadn't even seen him move. Crash turned and walked away. She watched his broad back, the ripple of muscle thinly veiled by his black shirt. His strength was shocking. The knife was fully embedded in the dirt, buried up to the hilt. Her blood turned to ice. She remembered how he had lifted her onto and off the horse, how he had effortlessly dragged her from the manor. He crossed to the other side of the fire and sank back into the tree line, his sword once again in hand. Then he sat near the base of a tree, all but removed from her line of sight, so still that, after several moments, he seemed to blend into the woods behind him. The shadows rose up, licking at the edges of his body, ready to swallow him whole. Sora didn't know how long she stared at that tree. The man wavered in and out of sight, like a ghost. Finally her eyes turned to Dorian, who had returned to his position across from the fire, sprawled in plain sight. He had a deck of worn yellow cards and was playing a game, throwing the cards down in a circular pattern, then occasionally flipping a few over. She was thankful when he didn't return her look. She'd had enough threats for one evening. She turned to her satchel and folded it, plumping up her change of clothes. Then she stretched out and laid her head against it, a makeshift pillow. If she pretended to sleep, maybe they would leave her alone. Well, at least I'm not dead, she reminded herself, wrapping herself in the heavy cloak, trying to ignore the cold moisture seeping up from the ground. The forest sounds were loud and forceful, not soothing like she was used to hearing from her bedroom window. Bird calls seemed harsh and grating, the crickets like rusty violins. The fire snapped and crackled, eating at the air. The wind clawed and hissed through the leaves, branches cracking together. There were strange rustlings in the underbrush, the heavy bodies of four-footed animals. She tried not to flinch at every sound, not to groan with fear. Will we be attacked by wolves? A bear? Dark terrors seemed to loom between the trees, staring down at her. And every time she closed her eyes, she saw her father drop to his knees, heavy as stone.
Hey, it's Dorian. Thanks for listening to Sora's Quest by T.L. Shreffler. Who does this posh little entitled heiress think she is? I find traveling with a spoiled girl as annoying as it is hilarious. Maybe we can teach her a thing or two about surviving on the road? Find out in the next installment of Sora's Quest, The Cat's Eye Chronicles, Book 1. Read ahead in the ebook available on Amazon.com and other retailers, or take a listen on Audible. Like and subscribe for more content. Until next time, keep your blade sharp and your wit sharper.